we're now on leg number 5, and yes, the hydraulic ankle has arrived. Yay! But we're still waiting for the next limb cover that I have ordered, and we're still waiting for the liner that was the fancy liner that we ordered that had drainage holes that would allow me to sweat during exercise. However, we're able to put this leg onto this ankle onto another socket in the meanwhile, and we have changed to a 3mm liner. Now what that does is means there is less movement inside the socket, because if you think of a big thick cushion and then you put something solid in it and move it around, how much movement there is in that, the thinner it is, the less movement there is inside the socket. Now I have been walking around on this socket for 24 hours since I collected it, and I honestly expected the liner, the really thin liner, to be really different, but actually it's not. When I feel the leg is starting to sweat and there's some moisture in there that I need to get rid of, it starts to move around. I can feel the leg moving around inside the socket, but it's a much reduced with a thinner liner on it. And yes, I've noticed a massive difference, but it's not given me any issues at all. I have had no pain or anything like that from it. It's been fabulous. So the hydraulic ankle, what is hydraulics? Hydraulics is fluid movement moving under pressure. That's how hydraulics work. So the ankle hydraulics have got a speed setting, and what I'm told is that we don't want it to be too fast because that puts a lot of pressure on the knee joint. And this is the knee I've still got that hasn't been tampered with, so we need to look after this knee. So we've set it to a normal sort of like run-of-the-mill setting for the ankle, and then that gives me this sort of hydraulics. The hydraulic has an optimum speed, and once it's started, I can't stop it. So as you can see, it's a bit slower. So, and the thing that is tripping me up with that is that very thing. It doesn't return to center. Wherever I put it, it stays there. So the thing that I'm having the biggest trouble with at the moment is from sitting to standing, and I'll show you why. Resting at seated, it moves itself to this position. When you sit down, you straighten your foot out and your foot reaches the floor. But what you do that you don't realize is when you go to stand up, obviously you move your knee and your ankle moves and you straighten yourself up to stand up. But this foot, this hydraulic foot, stays where I left it. So what I've got to do before I stand up is reset the ankle so that I don't fall back down again. It remains in the plantar flexion position, and I actually have to put my toe down to straighten it. Now I know it's only 24 hours old, but it's all these little changes, and I'm not used to having a moving ankle that I'm going to have to get re-used to being able to walk on a slightly different body part. So I took this video right after I got back last night. I hadn't walked very far on it at all, and I had sat in the car driving for 3 hours. This is what walking looked like straight away. Now, I put this video on slow-mo on Instagram and Facebook and asked people to comment on it to tell me how it looked different from the previous walking. Now, what everybody has said without a doubt is the ankle movement looks more natural, which is what I was told would happen, and that the hip hitch that I was having to do to compensate for the lack of movement in the ankle has gone, and the walking looks a lot more normal than it did before, and it was looking pretty good before. So I'm already feeling pretty chuffed with this foot and all of the things that it can do. I noticed straight away walking out of the limb center that it is a ton easier walking on slopes, both up and down, because it has some movement, and prior my ankle wouldn't move enough and the toe wouldn't reach the ground, or the heel wouldn't reach the ground, depending on the slope. So I'm liking this a lot. But I have tried to balance on one leg, and because it hasn't got a rear stop, it just keeps going. I'm going to have to re-practice that balance, because once you start the hydraulic action moving, it will just keep on going. So I'm going to have to do the whole pendulum effect in order to correct balance and start from the shoulders to correct my balance forwards and backwards, the same way as I had to when I lost the leg and I was trying to compensate for balancing on one leg. I was having to move my shoulders, where if you were standing on one leg and you lost your balance, you'd stick your foot out, didn't have a foot. So it's going to work the same. So it's going to take me a wee while to readjust to this foot, but I'm not complaining because it's better already. Next, the bike leg. So then I went away and came back later, and we tackled the cycling. Now, I wanted Ryoji to see the problem so that we could do a little set of problem-solving exercises to try and figure out how to fix the problem if we could identify it in the first place. Now, the issue is my knee comes up higher on the left-hand side, the prosthetic side, than it does on the right. Now, what we did was I pedaled to show him, and we were trying to work out why this might be. Was it the fact that the back of the socket was pushing my knee out of the socket, you know, like that? So the first thing we tried was cut away the back of the socket. Back the leg went, no, that wasn't the problem. So we scratched our head some more. So then he said, did I want him to shorten it? By how much? We don't know. So I put my knees at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, and he measured from the top tube of the bike to the knee on both sides, and we discovered there was quite a significant difference between the two. So he said, maybe the next thing we should try is making the leg slightly shorter. Now, I explained the biomechanics of pedaling, how we didn't want to have the leg locked out completely because that's not good for power, but we started off with 5 mil, and he took some length off the leg as well to try that. Then I put the leg back on, so now I'm walking like this because one leg's shorter than the other, and we put the leg back on and tried again. This time it's a lot better. Still not the same height as the other, but the left knee is not hitting my chest and my elbow anymore like it had been before. The issue here is that because I ride a time trial bike, the ergodynamic riding position for it is quite aggressive. So if I was just riding a mountain bike around the block, it wouldn't be a problem at all. That's why this is a problem. I need a bigger knee bend. So we scratched our heads, had a look, and did I want him to take any more off? No, because if you make the leg too short, I won't reach the bottom of the pedal stroke as well. So we decided to leave the angle as it was. So then we looked at the rest of it. Now, because I've got a foot on the end of this bike leg, the ankle and the post for the leg is not in the same position as the cleat, because if you had an actual foot, the cleat is on the ball of your foot and the post would be your heel. So he asked me, could I put the cleat in the middle of the shoe? No, because the shoe's got grooves and there's only a certain amount of play you've got in the position you can put the cleat on the shoe because of the grooves and the screw holes. So no, we couldn't do that. So what we're going to do is, first of all, I'm going to try it like this and see how it goes. The next step could be to take the foot off and put the cleat for the pedal right on the end of the post. That means that instead of having to bend my knee so far, the post would go straight down from my knee to the pedal without having the distance between the pedal and my heel of the foot, if you know what I mean. So that's what we're going to try next. However, we looked at the whole bend and how much bend there is in the knee and decided that we needed to cut some more away from the socket because it's putting a lot of pressure on the limb sleeve, which is probably why it bust the other week. So we took some more off the back, the sides and the front of the socket, so that there was less stretch on the limb sleeve, and away I go with it. So I cannot walk on this leg at all, but I'm going to try it on the indoor trainer on the Cervelo for a wee while and see how we go. We're still a bit up in the air as to whether a limb sleeve will actually work. Because of the amount of the bend in the knee, it works the limb sleeve down and eventually rolls down and off and there's nothing holding my leg on anymore. So we don't know whether a pin lock system is going to be better for it or not. I'm going to try this first and then give it a few weeks of working like this, and then see where we go from there. Whether the socket needs changing any, whether the foot needs to come off, and all them sorts of things. That's the plan, Stan. We're not going to make an actual leg yet because we need to tinker with what works best for me, the way I ride, and the type of bike that I ride, if that makes sense. Q&A time. So, I have already had a number of questions about this foot and ankle from various people on the internet. Here are the answers to those questions that I've received. What does it feel like? Weird. Now, since they gave me a prosthetic, you've got to remember I've had a very limited, if any, movement in the ankle. So I've gotten used to that and it's helped me balance. But it's restricted me from walking on certain surfaces and moving in certain ways. So however hard I tried, I couldn't not get rid of the hip hitch. So what does it feel like to walk on a hydraulic ankle? Well, to begin with, it felt like I was walking with flappy feet. You know, like your feet were doing this on the floor. And that, I think, is because until then, I had felt like there wasn't a foot because I had no sense of where the foot was or what it was doing. But now, when the hydraulic gets to its end point, I can feel the vibration of the foot hitting the ground. And that, I think, is what I'm sort of feeling to begin with. Now, it felt like a jerk through the knee to begin with when I first started walking on it, and it was a little bit odd. It didn't take very long, only a few minutes to get the hang of it, and I suddenly realised that my knee is now doing slightly more than it did before on behalf of my not ankle. So I went out to the car to get the bike and immediately found slopes to be better because it's got movement, like I showed you. When I go down a slope, my foot actually goes flat on the slope and it doesn't kick me forwards. Equally, going up a slope, because it has the flexion in the other direction, I can walk up a slope and my heel is still on the ground and it's not kicking me backwards. So the slope was like, woohoo, this is great. The hydraulics, they're sort of like, it's like a slow movement through, but it does feel a lot more like a normal walking gait. Straight away, it felt a lot more like a normal walking gait than the other one did. And I have walked around on it today and I instantly discovered that my hamstring and glute is doing a lot less work than it was. The hamstring and glute on that left side was what was stopping me and making me have to sit down when I was walking because it was fatiguing so fast. The physio said that he thinks it's because the hamstring and glute was fighting so hard against the lack of movement in the previous ankle. So I'm liking it so far, although it is weird walking on a hydraulic body part when the hydraulics move so slowly and gradually, but it's nice and smooth, and when I look at it back on a video, it looks a lot better. Does it feel stable? Well, to begin with, I wasn't sure what to expect when I stood up on it. I honestly didn't. But the hydraulics mechanism in it and the fact that it doesn't move fast, yes, it does feel stable. Because if you imagine if you had a non-controllable ball joint, that's sort of what I expected when I first stood up on it. I was like, unknown. But yes, the hydraulics control the movement in a slow and controlled way, which helps to make it feel a lot more stable than you might imagine. What's it like on uneven ground? I do not know because I've not tried, but I'll let you know when I have. But I have already mentioned that slopes up and down, and that was inside a building, were lots and lots easier. And steps up are a lot easier too because this socket has got even more cutout in the back, and there's a lot less bulk in the liner and the limb sleeve, which makes knee bending easier. But uneven ground, don't know. I'll let you know. Do I feel more balanced? Yes, I most certainly do, because I feel like my left leg movement action is a lot more similar to my right leg movement action than it was before. The two legs felt like they were doing different things, and it felt like the Ministry of Silly Walks prior. But now it does feel a lot better. And yes, I do feel a lot more balanced. Do I prefer it to the other ankle? I most certainly do. Now you've given me this, I'm sorry, there is no going back from here. I can't wait till we get to the next one with some cushioning, and the next one after that with some jumping and skipping. I'm feeling quite excited with all of this. It is a lot to adjust to, and every time they give me something else, you stand up and you're like, I'm not sure what's gonna happen. And I just can't describe what that is like. It's like stepping off the cliff into the unknown every single time you visit the limb centre. Now, that is just uncomprehendable to somebody who's not got a prosthetic leg. And it's not like, oh yes, I've learned how to walk with this leg, that's great, because every time they change the socket, it's different. Every time they change the ankle type, it's different. It changes all the time. And you get very good at adapting and learning the new movement and the feedback patterns through the vibration through your knee really quickly in order to fix the walk and look normal again. Thank you for all the questions, and tomorrow morning, all being well, I am going to go on Zwift with the new trial bike leg. So we'll look out for tomorrow and I'll let you know how that went. Hopefully it works out as we have hoped, and I continue to make excellent strides forward, quite literally.